Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I'm calling the Omniscient Caster. So recently I completed updating my tier list of every single spell in the game, and so today we're going to build a character that gets all the best ones. This character will have every one of the most powerful spells in the game that we can fit without compromising the strength of the character. And in addition to the awesome combat power and utility that having all the best spells in the game provides, we also get amazing skill access and are very tough to take down with great defensive capabilities as well. Incidentally, this is very close to the build that I used for my very first Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough, so it's one that I have a really soft spot for and really enjoyed playing, and I think it's amazing for doing as much of the game as possible in a single run because it gets to do, well, everything. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Alexander Ivanov for the $10 donation, Mr. Think Cajun for the $5, Josh Hobbs for the $10, and No Nation and Dave Wegner for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot to me. Alright, let's learn everything. I'm using this custom Githyanki character as the example character here, mostly for nostalgia reasons, but also because I don't think that this build particularly fits any of the companions from a lore perspective, though of course you can still use it for one of them if you want to. What it excels at, though, is being a main character, so whether that's an origin playthrough or a custom main character, because it gets to cover so many things, you really get to do anything that you might want to do in a given playthrough playing this character. What race we pick mostly doesn't matter. We're going to get all of our proficiencies from our class levels and everything like that, but there are some that have particular synergy. Githyanki is one of them because the extra skill proficiencies from Astral Knowledge let you cover even more of the bases for your party. Another great option is a halfling. This character is, of course, going to be rolling a lot of dice, wants to maintain concentration on spells, so being able to reroll ones makes you vastly more consistent. Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf's bonus movement speed are great, and Dwergar is excellent as well, since this is a spellcasting character. Being able to start fights by surprising a big group of enemies by landing a huge AoE spell on them from your Dwergar invisibility is always going to be an awesome option. But again, you should pick what you want for flavor. At first level, we're going to be starting with a level of Bard. This, of course, gives us the best access to skills in the early game, which lets us take all the skills that our party needs and take our place as the party leader right away. This does introduce a small wrinkle because this character will be using both charisma-based and intelligence-based spellcasting later on in the game, but I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. For our first level as Bard, we, of course, get to select 2 cantrips, and the ones that we're going to choose here are Friends, which makes us significantly better at dialogue checks, as well as Minor Illusion. Minor Illusion is one of the very best spells in the game, so right away we get to access some of the strongest spells out there in order to give our party the best access to spellcasting possible. For our spell selection here, we are also going to again, prioritize spells that I rated S tier, and we're going to pick up Longstrider and Healing Word. Using Healing Word as one of our Bard spells rather than one of our Cleric spells means it will be based on Charisma, and of course we are going to get a Cleric level later on. But since we take Healing Word as a Bard, we're going to cast it based on our Charisma, which is going to be significantly higher than our Wisdom, so we're going to get the maximum amount of healing. In addition to that, we're taking Dissonant Whispers, another spell I rated S tier. This spell, of course, is the best early game combat spell for a Bard, completely shutting down melee characters while also doing great damage. That's 3 S tier spells, but past that, we have a little more optionality in what we pick. I'm going to go ahead and take Disguise Self. This character is going to be our party face. Having Disguise Self is not only extremely helpful for that, it can also let us experience more of the storyline if you want race-specific dialogues, and of course it can give you additional access to items later on in the game. For our ability scores for this character, we have a little bit of a choice. This character benefits extremely heavily from using Ethel's Hair in order to boost our charisma by 1 point, so we don't have to spend as many ability score improvement feats on increasing our charisma and can still have very high spellcasting. So if you intend to do that, you're going to start with 17 charisma. You'll also take 14 constitution and 16 starting dexterity to maximize your initiative. We're going to take 8 intelligence here, even though we're going to be casting wizard spells, because we can use the Warped Headband of Intellect, an item that you get very early on in the game, in order to have 17 intelligence, and therefore be able to cast wizard spells just as well as any character can cast their spells that they've invested stats into in the early game. Later on in the game, we may want to swap away from the Warped Headband of Intellect and increase our intelligence if we're going to equip this character with another attribute item, like the Gloves of Dexterity, which can replace our Dexterity, or the Amulet of Greater Health, which can replace our Constitution. If you're going to use one of those 2 items later on in the game, you can respec the character to move the Dexterity into Intelligence and be able to equip another helmet, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the item slot. But basically, in the early game, we're taking 8 intelligence, and then we're going to use the Warped Headband to still be very powerful at casting wizard spells in the early game. We also, of course, get great skill access as a bard, and here the most important thing, of course, is that you take Persuasion, because this is going to be the party face, so this character is going to do all of the dialogue skills that you need. I also like grabbing Sleight of Hand on this character, since we're so good at skills, we can use Sleight of Hand very well and just be the lockpicking character for our party as well. If you're playing a Githyanki, you can also set your Astral Knowledge to Intelligence and get all of the knowledge skills, get proficiency in all the knowledge skills, which will let you pass those dialogue checks even with a negative to Intelligence, even before you get the Warped Headband and then get an additional bonus to those. If you're not playing a Githyanki, then once you get the headband, you'll still be reasonable at passing those skills. We'll also get more of them as we continue to level up the character. This gives us a great basis for our skill selection, and again, just lets us cover the most possible things for our party. Finally, of course, as a bard build, you need to make certain that you select the right starting instrument, or you are going to completely ruin your run entirely, so don't get this wrong, and then we're going to move on to level 2. A character level 2, we're immediately going to multi-class, and we're going to take a level of Cleric. This gets us a number of things. Firstly, of course, it gives us access to several more of the most powerful spells in the game, and it also gives us great defensive capabilities, because it gives us heavy armor and shield proficiency, or medium armor proficiency depending on what subclass we take. What subclass we take, there's actually a lot of choices here as well. You can take, for example, Knowledge Domain, which only gives you medium armor proficiency, but gives you expertise in 2 additional skills. So if you want your character to be even better at making knowledge checks, Knowledge Domain is a pretty reasonable pick. Light Domain also only gives medium armor, but gives you the amazing Warding Flare reaction. But the subclass that I'm going to suggest taking here is Life Domain. Life Domain gives us heavy armor proficiency, which gives us more defensive options, especially throughout the mid-game, and also comes with Bless as one of its domain spells, so we will always have it prepared, despite having only 10 Wisdom. Normally that would mean we would only have 1 Cleric spell prepared, so we would have to choose between Bless and Sanctuary, which are the 2 most important spells, but with Life Domain, we don't have to choose. We can concentrate on Bless and still have Sanctuary available. For a prepared spell here, of course, we're going to take Sanctuary. It's the most important of the Cleric spells, and one that we can't get any other way, and this spell will allow us to defend our allies vastly more easily, with Sanctuary as a bonus action, and then later on with Cutting Words as a reaction, so our allies will be very, very difficult to take down with this character in the party. We also get the Disciple of Life bonus, and we do have Healing Word from our Bard levels, so this character can add in some additional healing. And one of the spells that we might consider taking with our Magical Secrets later on is Mass Healing Word, which benefits extremely well from Disciple of Life as well. So Life Domain not only gives us better spell access and defensive capabilities, it also is going to synergize with its natural abilities, but there's definitely some room to play around here with which cleric subclass you start with. For our cantrip selection, we again are going to look to the game's most powerful spells. We're going to start with Guidance, which is probably overall the number 2 spell in the game, maybe, after Longstrider. It's very close. But this spell obviously makes your characters vastly more consistent across the course of the game. We're also going to add in Thaumaturgy. As a party face, the ability to gain advantage on intimidation and performance checks is extremely valuable, and Thaumaturgy gives us that for free without having to mess around with leaving the area to avoid committing a crime like Friends does. Finally, we're going to take resistance. This is pretty useful in some scenarios, so picking up resistance can be pretty helpful for this character. There are some dialogues in the game that want you to make saving throws. Having resistance can make you better at those. We also, thanks to a bug, get 2 additional skill proficiencies. You aren't supposed to get these when multiclassing into Cleric, but at time of recording, you do get these 2 additional skill proficiencies, so you can pick up medicine, religion, or history as skills known. And those, of course, are nice to have just as skills that you're proficient in, especially if you're not playing a Githyanki and so can't use astral knowledge to get all the knowledges for free. That's all the decisions that we have to make as a cleric, but this gives us yet another pile of amazing high-quality spells. Let's move on to level 3. At character level 3, we're going to multi-class yet again and take a level of Wizard. The way that wizard spellcasting works in Baldur's Gate 3 is that wizards can scribe spells from scrolls and then they learn them, but the level of the scroll that you can scribe is based on your total caster level, not your wizard level. So with 3 levels of spellcasters, we can scribe up to 2nd level spells as a wizard. This lets us take these 3 different levels and still have access to on-level spellcasting, while also getting casting from all of these other classes, so it's very, very powerful. Even with only 8 intelligence, this is still pretty useful because there are some very powerful wizard spells, most notably Cloud of Daggers is probably going to be our main combat spell at this level, and that will be plenty to win the fight that gets us the Warped Headband of Intellect, whereupon we will increase our wizard spellcasting and be able to cast spells just like a normal wizard would. Thanks to being able to scribe all of these spells, we have access to every single spell for which there is a scroll in the game and can learn all of them, which vastly broadens our ability to access the best spells in the game and make sure that we're casting all of them. For our cantrip selection here, we're going to go ahead and take our combat cantrips from Wizard. So we're going to take Ray of Frost, Firebolt, and Bone Chill. Now, these all have scrolls available, so once you find the scrolls for these spells, you can actually learn them from a scroll. And so you may want to respec to select a different cantrip. There are some cantrips that don't have scrolls available that you can take instead, but having all of these combat cantrips for high damage, slowing enemies, and doubling damage to wet enemies, and removing enemy healing gives you a lot of additional power level and a lot of additional combat versatility in the early game. Similarly, when we're picking up level 1 spells, there's a few that there are no scrolls for extant in the game, and so you can't learn those spells from a scroll, meaning you have to select them when you're leveling up. The most notable ones for us, because we already have Longstrider, are Shield, which is one of the most important spells for us to have, Find Familiar, which is just an extremely powerful spell, and Enhance Leap. None of these have scrolls available, and knowing them is incredibly important. Enhance Leap is a ritual spell, so it doesn't cost a spell slot, so just like Longstrider can vastly improve your party's mobility, and Shield, combined with the fact that we have heavy armor and shield proficiency from our level in Cleric, means that this character is actually extremely hard to take down. Even at this point in the game, when there's not really a good heavy armor set, in medium armor with a shield, this character is going to have 19 base armor class with a 15 AC medium armor and a shield. And then also can increase that up to 24, which most enemies at this point in the game will almost never be able to hit. In addition to these spells, we're also going to grab other good combat spells and high quality spells. Make sure you take Magic Missile and Chromatic Orb. These spells are extremely important. Magic Missile is another one that doesn't require us to have high intelligence, so we can use it up until we get the Warped Headband. And then finally, you can round that out with Grease, which is a really good control spell, allowing you to lock down all the enemies. But again, we're just broadening our access to all of the S-tier spells. In fact, the only ones we're missing from level 1 are Hex and Hunter's Mark at this point, which are obviously not particularly impactful for this character since we're not making attacks, so we can safely skip those. Now that we have the best cleric spells and all the wizard spells, it's time to go back to Bard. This is going to get us even more spell access and also make us significantly better at being the party face. Here we get Song of Rest. This character doesn't have too many short rest abilities, but obviously this is great for supporting your party, and we also get to choose an additional spell. What you pick here is going to depend a little bit on what you've found scrolls for as a wizard. Tasha's, for example, is a good spell to have, but is available as a wizard, so if you've found that if you found a scroll of it, you can skip Tasha's. Picking heroism can be helpful in some early game encounters, though by level 4, its usefulness has decreased a bit, so I'll suggest taking that. But overall, what you pick here is not going to matter that much because we've already got most of the spells that we want. At character level 5, we get to take our third bard level and choose a bardic subclass. And of course, for a spellcasting focused bard that wants to know everything, there's only one choice. We're going to choose College of Lore. Lore Bard is perfect here. It's going to give us better spell access with earlier magical secrets, and it also synergizes incredibly well with our offensive spellcasting through the use of Cutting Words. Cutting Words can decrease an enemy saving throw, and since we have so many spells that target saves, this is going to make our spellcasting vastly more reliable. In particular, later on in the game, because this character is going to use both intelligence-based and charisma-based spellcasting, there may be points in the game where our save DCs are a little bit lower than another caster, but Cutting Words just completely solves that problem by reducing enemy saving throws if they happen to save against one of your spells. We also, of course, get to choose a level 2 spell, and while normally for a bard you would probably choose Cloud of Daggers here as their best level 2 combat spell, this character is going to get that type of spell from Wizard Spellcasting. In fact, because we have our Wizard level, a lot of the best level 2 spells are available from scrolls. Cloud of Daggers, Hold Person, Misty Step, and Darkness are all spells that we're going to get to scribe as a wizard, so we don't need to select them as a bard. For that reason here, I'm going to suggest taking Enhance Ability. While this isn't one of the very best spells in the game, it is a really useful one to have available. You'll try not to cast it, but when you really just need advantage on a skill check, it's nice to have it, and this character again can help support the party by having abilities like this available at all times. We also get Expertise in 2 skills, so I highly recommend, of course, taking Expertise in Persuasion, and you can take Sleight of Hand Expertise. In addition to that, as a Lore Bard, we also get to add 3 extra skills known, so we get even more skills available. Here, we're going to go ahead and take Acrobatics, just to make ourselves a little bit harder to shove around, which this character is a little bit vulnerable to, with low strength and no Acrobatics proficiency prior to this, so we completely solve that problem. Then we can take Perception, or you can even use Stealth if you think that you want this character to maybe have a sneaky component as well. At this point, you can really just start covering any skills that you think your party needs. We've got all the dialogue skills, we've got lockpicking, so we're really covering all of our bases, and the rest is more or less just for fun. At character level 6, we're taking our 4th level of Bard, and here we get to select another cantrip, so we're going to take Blade Ward. This is pretty helpful for this character because there might be a time when you're cut off and surrounded by enemies. Blade Ward will allow you to buy a turn before they show up. An alternative is to take Light, especially if you have a dedicated healer in your party who's using the buff on heal items and providing Blade Ward. Light is, of course, always a useful cantrip, and level 6 is around when you're going to be needing sources of light easily castable in Act 2, so either of those make great options. For our spell selection here, we're going to take a spell that we haven't found as a wizard scroll and that we might want to cast at this point, which gives us a lot of different options that we can focus on, but Heat Metal does come up in some encounters, so I'm going to suggest taking that. Very useful against enemies who have a weapon that you particularly want to get rid of. Finally, we get a feat. And this is why this character benefits so strongly from using Ethel's Hair. This way we can get 18 Charisma without having to invest this feat in increasing our Charisma, which of course makes all of our Bardic spellcasting better, and then also makes us even better at dialogue, and lets us take Alert as our feat, so that we always go first. Given how powerful we are of a control caster, going first means enemies will usually not get a second turn, so it's great to win initiative, as it always is in any honor mode character. At character level 7, we're taking our 5th level of Bard, which gives us Font of Inspiration. Up until this point, we've had to be a little cagey with our Bardic Inspiration dice because they came back on a long rest. Now we get them back on a short rest, and so enemies are just going to be continuously failing their saving throws. Even though we're still operating on 17 intelligence from the Warped Headband at this point, our wizard offensive spells will still succeed very frequently because, again, we have Cutting Word, so we can reduce enemy saving throws and make our wizard spell casting extremely effective. We also get to choose a spell, but the most powerful bard spells at 3rd level are available as wizard scrolls, so we already have access to those, being Glyph of Warding, Hypnotic Pattern, and Fear. Also, of course, bear in mind that as a level 7 character with a wizard level, we have access to 4th level spells at this point, so we also have all the best 4th level spells. Things like Wall of Fire are already available to us, and we've had the best wizard spells at 3rd level for 2 levels already, including these spells and also things like Haste, which we are able to learn from a scroll. However, a new spell that we get access to at this point is Plant Growth. This isn't a wizard spell and is an extremely powerful and useful spell that also combines extremely well with some of the spells that we're going to be casting or learning at later levels, or ones that we already have. Plant Growth slowing enemy movement speed is awesome with things like Sleet Storm and Hunger of Hadar, which are again very, very powerful spells that we want to be able to take full advantage of. It also is non-concentration, so it works extremely well with those spells. Then, at character level 8, we get to take Bard level 6, which gives us even more amazing spell access, because as a lore bard, at level 6, you get early magical secrets. Not only do we get to take a spell from our bard levels, and here there's a couple utility spells that we might want to go back for, or anything that we have felt the absence of that we haven't been able to scribe as a wizard scroll. It's certainly possible that you've gone this long without finding scrolls of some sort of important spell, so you can reserve this pick for picking up one of those, or you can grab something like Glyph of Warding that you know you're always going to want to have prepared, and then prepare other wizard spells instead. For our magical secrets here, there is, I think, a pretty natural spell selection here. We're going to take Counterspell. The reason for this is, although this is a wizard spell, there is no scroll of Counterspell in the game, so this way we get access to, again, one of the game's very most powerful spells, and we're going to take Hunger of Hadar. Hunger of Hadar gives us yet another incredibly powerful control option, so depending on the combat, we have access to Hypnotic Pattern, Fear, Hunger of Hadar, and Sleet Storm, any one of which can win an encounter outright. Also Confusion, because we're a wizard, so we can scribe that scroll in our spellbook. And so having all of the best control spells available to this character means that we can select the right one for an encounter. And when you cast the right control spell in an encounter, you usually just win that encounter just with that spell alone. Hunger of Hadar is often the right spell, especially when paired with Plant Growth, so it gives us even more amazing options. Other alternatives, if we want some other spells and are not feeling like taking Hunger of Hadar for whatever reason, Spike Growth is not normally available to us currently, and Spike Growth is also an encounter-winning spell, and Warden of Vitality could be really nice if we want to lean more into doing this character as a healing build. Similarly, Mass Healing Word, if we're using the buff on heal items, is also a great selection. This character can also use Spirit Guardians, another S-tier spell. Because we have heavy armor and shield proficiency, we have cutting words, we have the shield spell, so we're pretty good at defending ourselves. We can use Spirit Guardian to just run into the middle of enemies with radiating orbs, if that's a direction that we want to go. This, I think, is the most natural magical secret selection, but there's a lot of room to play around here. At level 9, we get our 7th Bard level. Now, at this point, you could deviate from Bard and take levels in another class if there are really other caster class features that you're looking for. Maybe you want one of the wizard spell schools, or maybe you want more levels in a cleric domain. But getting the 2nd magical secret selection at Bard level 10 is awesome, and leveling in Lore Bard to increase the size of our inspiration die is just really good overall, so I like just taking the remaining Bard levels at this point. We're going to also get access to level 4 Bard spells, which gives us another spell not available to wizards in the form of Freedom of Movement. Although we have a lot of the other best spells available to bards from our wizard scrolls and have had them for 2 levels, because we're level 9 now, Freedom of Movement is incredibly powerful because it can snap an ally out of a stun, and so having this as a backup available all the time is extremely helpful to make sure that you can use it as a panic button in an emergency. At level 10, we get our 8th level of Bard, and we get to pick another spell. At this point, of course, you've collected most of the scrolls in the game, so you're probably not missing any major wizard spells, but one spell that there isn't a scroll for that we might want to have available is Silence, so that's probably what we're going to take at this point. This is a very useful ritual spell for shutting down enemy spellcasters. There's a couple late-game fights that Silence is very useful in as well, because it can turn off some honor mode abilities for certain bosses that have to yell to use them. So Silence is just a really good one that there's no scroll for. You'll probably want to pick it up from your Bard levels at some point. For our feat selection at this level, we're going to take an ability score improvement, but what ability we improve is actually a little bit dependent on what gear we're using at this point in the game. It's very possible by level 10 that you have swapped from using the Warped Headband of Intellect to using one of the other attribute items. For example, the Gloves of Dexterity, in which case you've moved this 16 in Dexterity into Intelligence, or the Amulet of Greater Health, in which case you've probably reduced some other stats in order to take 16 Intelligence as well, and then you can swap your helmet for another option. If you've done that, then an ability improvement should go into Intelligence to boost your Intelligence as much as possible. So if you're not using the Warped Headband, raise your Intelligence, because it's the attribute that you make your offensive spellcasting with more frequently than your Charisma. 18 Charisma and Expertise in all the relevant skills will be plenty, and 18 Charisma is also still plenty to use your offensive Bardic spellcasting, no problem, especially because we have Cutting Words and other ways to improve our spell save DCs. If you're still using the Warped Headband, then just put these 2 points into Charisma, because you can't raise your Intelligence if you're instead just replacing it. But I'm going to assume that at this point you've swapped to one of the other stat items, so you'll probably want to boost Intelligence at this point in the game. And then also, if you're using the Mirror in order to increase a stat, Intelligence up to 20, with 16 starting Intelligence, gets you just excellent late-game spellcasting, so you can have very high intelligence and be able to cast just like any other wizard would at maximum level if you're using those story events. Then, at character level 11, remember we get 6th level wizard spells at this point, so we can scribe scrolls of 6th level spells. Because we're an 11th level caster, so we can be using things like upcasting Conjure Elemental in order to summon a Myrmidon. We can cast things like Chain Lightning or Wall of Frost that have scrolls available, because Wizard allows us to do that. We also get a 5th level Bard spell. There aren't really Bard spells that we're that excited by at this point, but you could take Greater Restoration. There's no scroll for this in the game, so that could be one that you have access to that isn't otherwise available, that can occasionally come up. Mostly, Bardic 5th level spells are not that impressive in general, so you would take Hold Monster, but since there's a scroll for that, we'll already have that. Finally, at character level 12, we get to take our 10th level of Bard. We also get to improve our Bardic Inspiration and get Expertise in some additional skills. Of course, we get to pick up the most important spell of all, True Strike, to annoy people in the YouTube comments. And then we also get to take another Bardic spell. At this point, you can go back again for more utility options or things that you haven't picked up from your wizard spells, or spells that you just know you're always going to want to have prepared. Things like invisibility that are just always good to have available, even without preparing them with one of your relatively limited wizard spell slots. We also get magical secrets. And again, this is mostly going to be for spells that you know you always want available. Things like Conjure Elemental, which you're probably going to cast every single day. But also another amazing option is to pick up Command. While we do have this from our cleric levels, this is going to give us charisma-based command that's going to use our Bardic spellcasting, and so enemies will actually fail the save against this. And again, this is one of the best control spells in the game. It doesn't require concentration, locks down enemies, can be upcast and all that. So having access to command is amazing. So you'll probably pick something that looks like this, but again, there's a lot of room for expression in your magical secrets picks, and I highly encourage you to play around. You can even take another S-tier spell in the form of Eldritch Blast if you want. That just gets you yet another powerful cantrip option if you just want to do a little bit of ranged damage. Finally, we get expertise in 2 more skills, making us even better at our dialogue checks, for example, with plus 11s in, or actually plus 12s, because we'll have 18 charisma at this point. In all of these dialogue skills, we're basically never going to fail, and we also can get advantage on all of them from our cantrips. Or increase our numbers using guidance as well. So this character is just incredible at passing any skill checks that your party might need passed. All right, my friends, that is the Omniscient Spellcaster with access to basically every one of the best spells in the game. There are, I think, 2 spells that are, I would consider, really, really top tier that we're missing, those being Spike Growth, which we could take from Magical Secrets if we want, and Summon Woodland Being, which unfortunately only is available to 7th level Druids, so we would have to give up too much other stuff in order to get access to that. This character does pair well with a Druid if you want the full completionist experience of casting all of the game's best spells, because that's one of the very, very few that we can't cast with this guy. Of course, we can make the character even more powerful with items, and talking about how we're going to arrange our stat items and so on is very important, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, there are a couple items that we specifically need, but mostly what we're looking for from our items is increases to our offensive or defensive capabilities. Those take the form of any defensive item, so anything that increases our armor class or saving throws are really good for this character, and any item that increases our spell save DCs. This character, of course, is going to be using spellcasting as all of its offense, and we're trying to support 2 different casting stats, so boosts to our save DCs are really, really important. Firstly, let's talk about the items that we need to have. So the only item that we specifically absolutely need in order to make the character function is the Warped Headband of Intellect. Fortunately, this shows up early in Act 1, so you can grab it from the ogres, and you're still fine up until that point. You have Bard spellcasting, you can use wizard spells that don't require a saving throw, things like Cloud of Daggers, which has no saving throw, so it doesn't matter that you have low intelligence, and just bows that you can start the game with in order to do damage up until you get the Warped Headband. But then, of course, the character is going to spike in power level significantly once you have access to this item. In the late game, you may want to swap away from the Warped Headband of Intellect in order to use Natural Intelligence, because that can get you a higher intelligence cap. If you replace either your Constitution or Dexterity using one of the other major stat items in the game, the Gloves of Dexterity or the Amulet of Greater Health, then you can put those points into Intelligence, take 16 Intelligence, put your ASI into Intelligence, and then potentially use the Mirror in order to increase your Intelligence to further, and that would get you all the way up to 20. So in the late game, you may want to swap away from the Warped Headband of Intellect, because 17 will no longer be quite high enough for our purposes, and instead use Natural Intelligence to make the character's spellcasting even more powerful. In order to do that, you'll want either the Gloves of Dexterity to replace your Dex, or the Amulet of Greater Health. The Amulet is very useful whether or not you're removing points from Constitution, because increasing your hit points and ability to maintain concentration on spells, because you get advantage on con saves with this item, is really good for this character. But the Gloves of Dexterity are excellent for us. It increases our attack rolls with spells, which is awesome, and it boosts our initiative all the way up to +9 with Alert, as well as giving us really good armor class even when we're not wearing heavy armor, which is a setup we may want to go with in the late game. It also lets us just conveniently move this 16 dexterity over to intelligence, so we can very easily set up for our endgame high int setup. In addition to those stat items, we of course want any item that boosts our offensive capabilities by boosting our spell save DC. The best of these is Mark a Heshkir, which is just the best in slot weapon for any spellcaster, but especially one like this one that benefits so much from refreshing its spell slots and having extra just default powerful casts of Chain Lightning in every combat, because you get it once per short rest, is amazing for this character. Up until you get Mark a Heshkir, you're going to want to use any other staff that boosts your spell save DCs, like Melf's First Staff, which boosts your spell save DC and spell attack rolls, so Mark a Heshkir will be your endgame setup up until that point, anything that just makes you better at spellcasting. We also can increase our spell save DCs through our helmet slot once we've swapped out of the Warped Headband. The Fistbreaker Helm gives us a +1 bonus to spell save DC, and +1 to initiative, which is great, or the Hood of the Weave can give us a +2 to our spell save DC. If we don't want the defensive setup from the Amulet of Health, the Amulet of the Devout is +2 to our spell saves as well, so that increases our spell saves even further. If for whatever reason we're not using the Gloves of Dexterity, although I do recommend those in the late game for this character, the Helldust Gloves make a great late game option because again, they boost our spell saves. Finally, the Ring of Feywild Sparks. This is the secret best-in-slot ring for most spellcasters, because although it doesn't say so in the description, this item boosts your spell save DCs by 1, even though you're not a sorcerer. So the description here just says stuff about wild magic sorcerer, but it also has the hidden property of boosting your spell saves by 1. They just didn't manage to add that to the tooltip, so most spellcasters are going to want that in the end game. We're also going to add in defensive items. The Ring of Protection is great. Our saving throws and our armor class both could use a boost for this character. And for our armor, we can use heavy armor because we are a life cleric. So we can use the adamantine splint to become immune to critical hits. And then in the later game, potentially swap to the dwarven splint mail, which boosts our constitution, making it easier for us to maintain concentration on spells. Finally, in the end game, we may want to swap to the Robe of the Weave, because this, again, boosts our spell save DCs, and we can, at that point, easily afford the 1 spell slot per day to cast Mage Armor, and we'll also have the Gloves of Dexterity, which will give us +4 armor class from our dexterity. If you have the Gloves of Dexterity, the Robe of the Weave, and then +3 additional AC from Mage Armor, setting your base AC to 13. That gives you 19 AC, which is the same base AC as the Dwarven Splint Mail, so you can get a more offensive setup without sacrificing armor class in the late game. For our cloak, again, we're looking for a defensive cloak, so the Cloak of Protection will serve us very well all game. Just boosts to our AC and saving throws are excellent for this character. And for our shield, we're going to want to use Ketheric's shield. This character will, of course, want to use a shield to boost its armor class, and this boosts our spell save DCs, so this is the only one that really matters to this character. With the Gloves of Dexterity and Alert, we'll have +9 to our initiative, which is enough for Honor Mode. You can increase your initiative even further, though, with the Hellrider Longbow. If another character in your party needs the initiative more, that's fine, but going up to +12 means you'll go before basically every enemy in the game, so the Hellrider Longbow is the best-in-slot bow in the late game for this character. Passive boosts like that, or resistances from the Darkfire Shortbow are the type of thing that you're looking for. You're not going to fire your bows once you get access to the Warped Headband and can use wizard cantrips instead. In the early game, though, you are going to use whatever bow you manage to collect in the early game for the first 2 levels or so, instead of using cantrips, because it will be more accurate thanks to your 16 dexterity. Finally, for our boots, the Boots of Striding are probably your best bet for most of the game. You're almost always going to be concentrating on a spell. In Baldur's Gate 3, if you get knocked prone, you immediately lose concentration on a spell, so the Boots of Striding make you immune to that happening. We also, for our elixir, are going to want the Elixir of Battle Mage's Power, so anytime you're using an elixir, this is the best one. It's not necessary, but boosts to our spell save DCs are, of course, incredible. The Elixir of Battle Mage's Power is a little bit deceiving, because it gives you Arcane Acuity, which normally you lose when you take damage, but that doesn't happen with the Battle Mage's Power elixir. It gives you a minimum of 3 Arcane Acuity, and it doesn't tick down. So you will just get +3 to your spell save DCs for the entire day if you use the Elixir of Battle Mage's Power. A couple other things that are worth mentioning. The Helldust Gloves, if you aren't using the Gloves of Dexterity, boost your save DCs and attack rolls with spells, which is also really very good. And then, of course, we want a good selection of scrolls, because this character needs to make absolutely certain that you collect all the best wizard scrolls. Some in particular, you're going to obviously collect all of the scrolls that you find and learn as many of them as possible. But some of the ones that are really worth looking out for in the early game, and maybe worth spending money on over getting an item that you want early on, include Cloud of Daggers, it can be somewhat difficult to find this scroll early on, depending on how you roll in terms of rolling it at a merchant or whatever. So if you find one, make sure you snap it up, because this is going to be your best early game combat spell. Some other important ones are Haste, Wall of Fire. These are both just very good spells to have access to. And then for the late game, Conjure Elemental is going to be the best use of your 6th level spells, and Globe of Invulnerability for fights where you need that. Very, very important. Also, of course, we're a wizard, which means we get access to the unique wizard spells. So in Act 3, there are these spells that can only be learned by scribing them from finding these scrolls. Artistry of War, Dethrone, and Sights of the Seelie are unique spell scrolls, so keep an eye out for these. This character gets access to those as well. Since we're boosting our spell save DCs, we're also very good at using Illithid powers, and in particular using Black Hole. If we use the Zaith'isk to get Illithid powers as a bonus action, using Black Hole to drop enemies on top of each other and then blow them all up is really, really powerful. So this character makes a great Illithid power user as well, but mostly you're going to be focused on your spellcasting. So for your final endgame setup, you'll likely be using something that looks more or less like this. The Hood of the Weave in the head slot, Cloak of Protection, Robe of the Weave, Gloves of Dexterity, which makes all of the rest of this work. And we've swapped out the Boots of Striding because we need to use Mage Armor, so we can't have a medium armor boots for the Helldusk boots that basically do the same thing but better. You can also just use the Evasive Shoes in this if you don't yet have the Helldusk boots by the time you want to make this swap. Our weapon, of course, is Marka Heshkir, and our shield is Ketheric's shield. Our amulet is the Amulet of Greater Health, although you can change that for the Amulet of the Devout if you're finding that your spells aren't landing, but they should be landing. And then the Ring of Protection and the Ring of Feywild Sparks, and finally the Hellrider Longbow to boost our initiative. We are also running an Elixir of Battle Mage's Power, so that's kind of the optimal endgame setup for equipment, though again, there's some room for customization. Using this, you can see that even with our Bard spells, which have a lower DC, we still have an 80% chance to succeed against a really high save enemy like the Oathbreaker Knight. And then if we're using it against someone with a slightly lower save, so we have a 95% chance. And even if the Oathbreaker Knight with his super high saving throws succeeds, we can use Cutting Words to succeed on the spells anyway. So our spell casting should be extraordinarily reliable. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the ultimate omniscient spellcaster, and of course, I hope that you enjoy playing it in your honor mode runs. I know I have had a blast with this character. As always, of course, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.